Okay, my name is Carlton Cartwright. I'm the Executive Director for Veterans Memorial and Multicultural Histories Incorporated. Today is Saturday, July 23rd, 2022, and we're at Post 13 of the Veterans for Foreign Wars. American Legion, Post 13. This is the Sauls-Bridges American Legion, Post 113 in Tallahassee, Florida. Actual address is 229 Lake Ella Drive, Tallahassee, Florida 32303. And sir, what is your name?
Robert Trapnell Caldwell.
Okay, Mr. Caldwell. And when is your birthday?
7/14/21 I was born. So my birthday is December the 14th. July 14, 1921.
And who is the young lady sitting next to you? Miss, who are you?
I'm Janet Caldwell Clark. I'm Robert's oldest daughter.
Okay, all right. And you both reside in the city of Tallahassee?
We
Yes.
both decided in the city of Tallahassee
Okay. Thank you.
at 724 Ivanhoe Road, Tallahassee 32312.
Okay. Great. And sir, what branch of the service did you go in?
I went into the Naval Service
Right. And what year was that?
in June of 1942.
Why did you join the Navy? Why did you choose that branch?
One of my friends that I had known for several years had just finished college and he was going to join the Navy. So he visited my parents and me before that and kind of encouraged me to join the Navy, which I did.
Okay. And what were you doing prior to going into the Navy, sir?
I went through Florida Southern College and graduated on May the 28th of 1942.
Okay. If you don't mind my asking, what rank were you when you separated from the military?
I was Lieutenant Commander,
Okay.
USN.
All right. Wow. Do you know what that was? Was that, you know, in enlisted we have E5, E9. On the officer side in the Navy, what level were you at?
I think that was
When you first go in, it's
E4, I believe.
Okay, it wasn't E, it was something else but 4. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. You said you were a lieutenant commander, right?
Yes.
What was that? Was that like a colonel or a major or?
It was like a major.
Major. Okay, that's fine. All right, so you went in as an officer.
I went in as an aviation cadet.
Ah, okay. And so where did you go for your training?
Well, they didn't have any place to put us at that time. I went to South Florida for training in a private college.
Can you remember where in South Florida?
Miami, South Miami, and it was Embry-Riddle Flight School.
What you say in South Florida? What city was that? Was that somewhere around Miami or the Keys?
It was somewhere around Miami.
Mm-hmm. How long was? Go ahead. How long was the training?
The training there was about 2 months. I took ground school there while I was in training and went to ground school for celestial navigation, which I couldn't figure out why at that time. And then went to gunnery school at the same time.
How long was that training?
That was 3 months.
Okay, so several months you spent in the initial training, and then you spent another 3 months in gunnery school?
I spent 1.5 months there, say 2 months.
Okay, so after both of those trainings, did you go to your first duty station, or did you go home for a break?
My first duty station for flying was in Cocoa, Florida, in a river that was inside the ocean. It wasn't in the ocean, but there were seaplanes there, which I flew, learned to fly.
So you became a pilot?
I became a pilot, and before that I went to Navy flight school, Navy aviation school to get a flight test to see if I was able to be a cadet. And I was, and so they sent me back to learn celestial navigation and gunnery.
Did you eventually wind up becoming a pilot?
I became a pilot. I had made a private pilot's license the day I graduated from college in May of 1928, May the 28th, 1942.
Okay. So, all right, so after you finished school, where was your next duty station?
My next duty station was at Cocoa, Florida.
Okay.
I learned to fly seaplanes there.
Oh.
They had some seaplanes that had been to war and come back, and they trained us on those.
Okay, and how long was your training there?
It was about 3 months, I think.
Okay, so at what point did you get to go to Korea?
I didn't
Oh, you didn't?
go anywhere but to a Navy base in Southern Maryland Naval Air Test Center.
Okay.
That was south of Wilmington, North Carolina.
All right. Okay, so I see you have listed here that you were in the Korean War.
No.
No.
No, I was not. My friend was, who encouraged me to get in the Navy flight school. But I was in training in Banana River, Florida, Naval Air Test Center.
Okay, all right. Okay, so what took you to the Pacific Theater?
Well, we flew from Florida over to San Diego and trained in a kind of a plane that we were going to fly overseas.
What kind of plane was that? I see you have listed here.
PBM-2, the one.
Gotcha. All right. So, but before that, you learned how to fly a BPB-16?
Yes, it was. That was the name of the squadron we formed in North Carolina, just south of Wilmington.
Why was it called Flying Twins? Is that a twin-engine plane?
Yes, it was.
Uh-huh. Okay.
My seaplane was a twin-engine plane also.
Let me ask you a question. During your trainings, were there any casualties? Did anybody get hurt? Any disabilities?
Not during my training, no,
Okay.
sir.
During the war.
Right. So I see here you have listed Battle of the Philippine Sea.
Yes,
And okay.
that
And
was.
that
I
was what?
Sent out to the Pacific from San Diego
Uh-huh.
to an island called Sumatra.
How-
which we just took from the Japanese.
And how long were you stationed there?
I stayed there about a year, I guess, and we had night flying. That's when we used our celestial navigation. We took our positions. We flew out 800 miles across 150 miles climbing, and then we flew back to Sumatra. And it was on one of those formations that I picked up a big radar target.
Can you explain to us, sir, a little bit more about celestial aviation and exactly what that means for people that may not know?
Could you hear him?
Can you explain the definition of celestial navigation training?
That's
Celestial.
basically your position when there are no radios or anything there to show you how far out you were. We learned to fly by celestial training. We had a sextant that went through the roof of our plane, just like ships do. And that's how we learned our position in the Pacific War. And
Would you say basically that you used the stars
we
to
used the
navigate?
stars, the moon, and when the sun came up, if we had to fly in the daytime, we used the sun.
Okay, the position of the sun.
Yes,
Exactly. Okay, so how long were you stationed in the Philippines?
we were there, I guess, before it was all over. We went to about a year, 6 months to a year.
Okay, and did you engage the enemy, I take it, at that time, the Japanese?
We picked up a radar target one night, which turned out to be the Japanese fleet. They turned the carrier lights on for me to come in for a landing. We went to see what it was, and we got within 5 miles of it, and they turned the lights on for me to make a landing. But I couldn't land my seaplane there, and I didn't want to land there.
Why
In the
not?
first place, I couldn't do anything there on deck. So we turned and gave the position of that fleet to our fleet down 450 miles south of them, or east of them, actually, in the same sector as I had at night. So they decided that they would go up to the side of the fleet where I gave them the position, fill their planes with gas so they could fly 450 miles up there and fly back after the battle. And they sank 3 aircraft carriers, 1 battleship, and 1 cruiser, and the rest went home to Japan.
Okay, so you're saying the Japanese sank these vessels?
The Americans.
We sank it with our fleet.
Okay.
Which went up there to the position I gave them.
Okay,
We engaged in the Battle of the Philippine Sea.
okay,
Our pilots flew from our aircraft carriers in an early morning raid.
One of our planes got shot down. He was a dive bomber pilot, and he was 18 years old at the time, and his name was Bush. He became our first of the series of Bush presidents.
okay. All right, so that was George Bush,
Yeah,
right? President Bush, I understand. You just mentioned something about somebody going back to Japan. And so can I take it for granted that the enemy, the Japanese, after the engagement, they turned tail and they went back to Japan? Is that what you meant?
they're the ones that were left. But I went on down as far as Palau, just a little bit away from Australia,
Uh-huh.
and stayed for several months looking for the Japanese down there, and the ones that came up at night. One came out of Guam that I could see, and I reported it not knowing that our fleet was getting ready to invade Guam. And so they sent a destroyer after it, told me not to bother it. I would get into their fleet. So a bomber a destroyer dropped a dive bomb, a depth bomb charge, and blew that plane, that submarine up.
It was a Japanese sub?
It was a Japanese sub with all the people who were in charge of Guam at that time for the Japanese. And then I went on down to Palau, and we looked for submarines down there.
So you were doing
Japanese fleet.
Okay, so you were doing reconnaissance for enemy ships.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Casualties on our side, on the American side. And first of all, how large was your unit? How many individuals were in your unit?
15.
Okay. All right.
Flight crew.
Right. Oh, the flight crew? 15 people?
Flight crew was 8 men.
Uh-huh.
15
It was after the war that I flew the 4-engine planes.
Okay. So while you're still in the war, what I'm trying to find out is, were there any casualties in your unit?
Yes, there were. Going out to to Hawaii was the first casualty. He had an engine go out just after we left El Paso, where we spent the night on the way to Tokyo, San Diego, and they lost all the crew of that plane because it hit a rock, turned over and burned.
Hit a what?
A rock in the desert.
Oh, wow. On takeoff?
No, and it was on the way to San Diego.
So the incident happened on the ground or in the air?
It happened on the ground, and I had given them a position of a lake in North Mexico for them to land, but they feathered the wrong engine and went down and killed everybody.
Oh my God.
Then we went on to San Diego and learned to fly a new aircraft with surface bombs on them, depth charges. And we had a new torpedo given to us that was run by a battery that was electric, and we learned to use that while at San Diego. Went on out to
Sumatra?
Sumatra by way of Hawaii,
Okay.
and Sumatra was 300 miles west of Hawaii.
Okay. Was that in the Philippines, Sumatra?
It was in the Pacific Ocean.
Right. But what group of islands was Sumatra in? That's what I'm trying to...
I didn't know the name of the group of islands. I just knew that there was an island about 3 miles from it to the south that had been the only flat place in the Pacific that they could put runways. So they put 2 mile, 1 mile runways, 2 mile runways on that island. And later on, the bombs were taken out there by Indianapolis cruiser and put on that island. and that's what they bombed Japan with the first time. But I went on down to Palau, which was north of Australia,
Oh,
about 200 miles. And there we tried to find surface planes, submarines, and one of them tried to find us that was taken off of a Japanese submarine, which they had made to carry 2 small submarines with a 2-man crew. And all they were to do was to go and find us in one of the harbors, hopefully. And they found one while we were at Palau. And when they were coming into the harbor where our planes were anchored, they run into a rock and burst the submarine and killed the 2 men that were on it.
So then you knew they knew where you were.
Huh?
So you knew they knew where you were.
They knew where I was, and they sank themselves by running into a rock, trying to get into us.
Trying to get into the harbor.
okay. And, okay, it looks like Sumatra's it's
What
part of the Philippines. Is that part of the Philippines?
was in the,
It's on that map.
it was on nearest to Australia right at that time,
Right,
in Palau, the island of Palau. And that was an island that had a lot of phosphate on it that the Japanese used for their growth of grain and fiber. And yet we had some Marines in there who took that island and we went to it.
so that interfered with their supplies chain,
Yes,
yeah,
that
without a doubt.
took care of that. We had a supply ship that came there and gave us food, and then we had plenty of food on our seaplane tender, the Pocomo. And we were down there till the war was over. The Japanese had surrendered on the Missouri in Tokyo Harbor, and General MacArthur took the surrender at that time on the stern of the battleship Missouri, where they came aboard, all except the Emperor of Japan. He sent his colleagues over to send the surrender, and General MacArthur signed it.
How close were you? Were you present at that moment? Were you there physically?
No, I was still in Palau when that happened, but then they let us come back, and we came back through Sumatra, then to to Honolulu, and then to the USA. When we started back to the USA, one of our engines went out, and we flew, with God's help, back to the island of Hawaii, which was 800 miles away.
Right. Okay, you mentioned Palau several times, so that was in Malaysia?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, near Singapore.
Uh-huh.
Okay, all right. Casualties. Did you witness a lot of casualties during the time that you were there? And that's either...
I did not wish it. I did not see any casualties.
Uh-huh.
We came upon a Japanese soldier on one of our airplanes that had the bottom shot off, so it landed near Sumatra, where it could be pulled up on the concrete.
What was that, a
But
ship?
was
A
the
ship?
only Japanese I saw I have his rifle at home.
Okay. How'd you manage to get his rifle?
What?
How did you get his rifle?
We took it from him.
He was by himself? He wasn't with any unit or?
No, he was, what we were in was behind, actually in enemy territory, and we didn't know it when we went across the island to see some of the Marines on the other side. We thought everybody had come over and were finished with the war on Sumatra, but they weren't. After that war was when we went down to Palau.
Okay.
What about when you saw the wreckage of Amelia Earhart's plane?
Oh, we went, after the war, they sent me down north of Macon Island to another island which had not been invaded by, it had been, but they left it alone real quick when we got to Macon Island. And they used to give us our food by frying our fish over the coals in the hole in the sand. And then one day they sent a group of 8 men over for us to fly to every island that was in the Pacific and see if there were any men there, dead or alive. We did not find any there, but on the island of Howland Island, we did find the landing gear of a lady that was going to fly from Australia around the world. And
Who was that?
Amelia Earhart,
Okay.
I don't know if you knew that lady or not,
Well, I didn't know her personally, but I know who she was.
but she had been taken away from the island and buried in Sumatra before we could take Sumatra. And one of the leftover natives told us where they were buried, and they were taken up and sent to the USA.
Her
But I
remains?
was at Palau at that time.
Okay.
What they discovered on the island was the landing gear from the plane.
Oh,
And the
Yeah.
Japanese had taken that plane back to somewhere in Japan
okay.
to look at it. But the landing gear where they had crashed,
Uh-huh.
because there wasn't enough room for
It
a
was on
runway.
Howland Island where they crashed, and there was still the landing gear of the aircraft on the beach when we took some men over there to see if there was anybody alive on the island, and there was not. But we knew that they had emergency landing there at that island, I guess.
Okay, so they found landing gear, but did they find any remains from the bodies?
No, they were buried on Sumatra, which was our headquarters, and we didn't know it until a man who has made a home under one of the bridges and told us that they were there and where they were buried. And they took them up and sent them to the USA.
Okay, so it was the physical remains?
Yes,
Okay. Oh, wow. Fantastic. Okay, so how many years did you spend in the military altogether?
22,
22
flying with the Navy.
Okay, so after the engagement in Japan, where was your next duty station?
Well, we flew, I think, back home, and Newport, Rhode Island was my next duty station. And I went there. There was a junior war college in Newport, and we went to school there for about 3 months. That was the island near Newport, Rhode Island.
Okay, and what did you go to, was that flight school again?
I went to flight school at Newport, Rhode Island, which was the Naval Air Test Center.
Okay.
Changed planes.
They changed planes there.
What kind of plane were you flying now?
C-121
Okay.
radar plane.
Mm.
It was a big plane that carried the bombs to Japan.
Really?
Same kind of plane, only they took the bombs, big bombs, to
And-
Japan.
So how long were you there?
Let's see, I was there about 2 months, I guess.
That was it, just 2 months, just for training?
Trained in C-121s.
Okay.
We went to Jacksonville.
Then I went to Jacksonville and we became an operations officer there. This was after the war.
Okay, what were your duties?
I was operations and assigned to fly a plane with the 6th Naval District commander on it, and he was in Charleston. So I'd fly up there, pick him up, and take him where he wanted to go in the 6th Naval District. They were training people after the war to make a living, and he went to examine the training places that they were using, which was military bases that were no longer needed.
Okay, so, okay.
From there I went to Guantanamo, Cuba, where I used my radar training.
Can you hold that thought,
Yes.
please? We need to stop for a minute, we'll take a break.
Just gonna take a quick, like, not even just a couple minutes.
Yep. Guantanamo Bay?
Yes.
Yes,
How long were you stationed there?
we were stationed at Guantanamo Bay for 3 years.
Oh. And what was your position at that time?
I was in a position of training radar ships and to find where they were using radar, where the enemy could be found, and on surface and in the air.
Okay.
I was training crews on ships that had been brought out of storage and new ships that were going to war in Korea.
Okay, so this was, okay, during the Korean conflict. And so you were there for 3 years training. You remember what year it was?
In when was I last place?
Is it like 45 to
Terry
48?
Terry was born in Cuba.
What year was
and
that?
He was born,
What year was I in Cuba?
about 52.
Okay. Oh, really? Wow. Okay, so
What was it?
okay, so were you the commander in charge?
I was in charge of a group of Marines, and then base operation and Naval Air Test Center.
Okay. All right, so so after the Japanese conflict and the Korean conflict started, did you come back to the United States at all, or did you just stay in the Pacific Theater?
I came back and went to teach Navy ROTC.
Where was
at
that?
Auburn, Auburn, Alabama.
Uh-huh. And how long were you there?
3 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and what was that like? Did you enjoy that, or?
Well, there was a Marine Light Colonel there in charge of the unit, and he told us when we checked in to go over and also check into graduate school and get a degree while I was there.
So you got your master's degree.
Yes, I did.
And in what field? What career?
In education technology.
Wow. How long did it take you to do that? 2 years?
We were there 3 years.
Okay. When you say we, who is we? You mean your unit, or you were married, or
My unit,
were you married?
Yes.
yes, I was.
Okay. And was your wife stationed with you? Wife?
Yes.
Okay. All right. You have any children by this time?
We had
Two.
2 children, I think it was. My first child is with me, and my second child was a son. And later on, when I got back to the USA, I had a daughter. So I had a total of 3 children.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so after this, I guess it was you were a professor. Were you teaching?
Yes, I was.
Okay, now you're a professor, exactly.
At
Teaching.
Auburn, Alabama University.
And how long did you stay there teaching?
3 years.
So what was your next duty station?
We went to Patuxent River.
Okay. So let me go back for, again, so you were stationed in Korea, correct?
I
No.
was stationed in,
He was training troops to go to Korea.
Right.
Is that?
Right.
Okay, all right.
using their radar. I was radar training center,
Okay,
Patuxent River.
during any of these trainings, did anybody get hurt? Were there any casualties?
That training was in.
No, not training.
Guantanamo.
Okay, right, gotcha. So let me go back and ask you again. While you were in the Philippines, while you were engaging the enemy, how did you deal with that? You know, how with the
They didn't attack me. They couldn't find me, I guess.
That's a good thing. All right. Now, did you come into contact with soldiers that had been in and by the grace of God? So you were never a POW, correct?
Never.
Okay, good. Did you interact with a lot of service people that came back from conflicts in the Japanese war?
After the war?
Yes, sir.
After the war, the pilots that were in my squadron overseas used to meet every year, every 2 years at first, and then every year in their own home city.
Okay.
I had 2 of those
Reunions.
reunions,
Okay.
one in Tampa and one in Pensacola.
Okay. Have you remained close friends in these years?
Yes,
Okay.
we were.
All right. So after were we at Auburn? After
Auburn.
what was the next duty station?
See, Auburn was like considered shore duty.
Uh-huh.
So he taught naval ROTC there
Oh.
while he was getting his master's as well.
Oh.
Okay, so the next was Patuxent River, Maryland, which is the Naval Air Test Center.
Mm-hmm.
And
How long was he there? How long? What Patuxent? How long were you there?
in Patuxent River about 5 years. I think so.
3 years or
5.
5 years, I guess.
Okay. And what did you do there?
I trained
No, 2 different squadrons.
and I got into 2 different squadrons that flew C-121 land planes, and I had to learn to fly them.
Okay. And so so you're in now you're training, but you learned to fly them to train other
Yes, I did.
troops. Okay.
Well,
I trained the groups who used to fly blimps in the Navy.
Really?
They came to Naval Air Test Center and learned to fly aircraft on land.
Okay.
and then the squadron you were with, you flew out of Newfoundland.
in the
Russian barrier.
I flew 4-engine land planes, C-121s, when I went to St. John's, Newfoundland after the war, and flew across from Newfoundland to the Azores and back at night with our radar on, so we could determine the ships that were our station ships were on place, and then we were in contact with them on the surface, and we could report anything that we saw coming out of Russia.
This was during the Cold War, so
Uh-huh.
he was flying the Russian barrier.
So it sounds like he was doing a lot of intentional reconnaissance,
Yes.
right? You're doing a lot of,
These were the great big planes
Uh-huh.
that are the size of passenger planes, but they were equipped with very heavy-duty radar.
The radar was stationed underneath the plane and could find targets 200 miles away,
wow,
and the height finder was on top, so we could tell how high they were.
wow.
And that was my radar crew. I had a good radar crew on there.
He
And I-
was the pilot in charge of a 28-man crew
Oh, wow,
on
okay.
those planes.
That was a lot of responsibility.
And he was in a second squadron where he was stationed.
In the Mediterranean, flying over our ships in the Mediterranean from one end to the other. And we were based in a German base just north of Casablanca, Morocco. And we would live there, get our planes trained there and fixed there. And then we would fly over the fleet so that they could tell where they were. They had a large formation, so a drop bomb wouldn't get all of them.
Okay.
After Pearl Harbor, they learned you don't keep all your planes working together. You spread them out, and that's what they used the radar planes for, because then they could see where all of their fleet was anywhere in the Mediterranean.
At any given time.
Yes.
Okay.
So they flew those planes 24 hours a day, didn't you?
Yes, I was a night flyer because I had so much night training.
Then-
But this time we could talk because it was in the Cold War. I know one time Gorbachev started over to meet with some people in our country, in Canada, and his plane lost an engine, and he landed at St. John's, Newfoundland, at our airport down southeast side of Newfoundland, and stayed at our manicure
Barracks.
barrack, which was a seven-story building and had lots of equipment in it, and he was on the top floor of that flight.
Did you get to meet him?
I didn't, but I saw him
Okay.
coming and going.
Right,
Next station, Key West.
right.
The next station was Key West, Florida, and I was there for a couple of years
The Naval Air Station?
at the Naval Air Station, Boca Chica.
Uh-huh. And
That was a Navy Air Station.
what were your duties?
I was a lieutenant at the time,
Uh,
and I was in charge of teaching people how to fly 4-engine aircraft who came out of blimps,
No, that was in Patuxent River.
Patuxent River.
In
Yes.
Key West, you
I was
were-
in Key West when the
you were doing-
Kennedy was president, and the Bay of Pigs invasion that he started didn't work, and the planes landed at our base, and I was in charge of several of the units on the island where we lived, One was on Boca Chica, where we had bombs and radar, and we had our water pipe all the way from Homestead, USA, down. It was about 110-mile long water pipe that always took fresh water to
Key West.
Key West. And while I was there, one of my former teachers in Florida State told me that they were wanted to get ready to put technology programs all in Florida. Well, I decided to retire from the Navy at that time, which was November 1963, and started working for the Department of Education. We put 35 technical centers in Florida during the next several years, and 18 in community colleges where they were wanted to launch aircraft, and they didn't have enough assistance to their engineers to do all that. So I put 18 assistant technical people, programs in community colleges, while doing 35 to the education center on land.
He was working with NASA at the time.
From where? Where was he stationed?
He was out of the military then. He had retired.
Okay, right.
When we were in Key West after we had the Cuban crisis, and we
Mhm.
went through all of that. I was in the 10th and 11th grades when all of that was going on in Key West. It was very interesting because here we are in the United States, and we have a barbed-wired beach, and every branch of the military was there, stationed there at the time, and we had curfew, and we could see missiles. Everywhere they had clusters of palm trees, you could see missiles set up around the island. So it was a very interesting time.
What year was that?
That was 1965. Top floor of that flight.
Did you get to meet him?
I didn't, but I saw him
Okay.
coming and going.
Right.
Next station, Key West.
Right.
The next station was Key West, Florida, and I was there for a couple of years
At the Naval Air Station?
at the Naval Air Station,
What,
Boca Chica.
uh-huh. And
That was a Navy Air Station.
what were your duties?
I was a lieutenant at the time,
Ah.
and I was in charge of teaching people how to fly four-engine aircraft who came out of blimps,
No, that was in Patuxent River.
Patuxent River.
In
Yes.
Key West, you
I was
were-
in Key West when the
you did-
Kennedy was president, and the Bay of Pigs invasion that he started didn't work, and the planes landed at our base, and I was in charge of several of the units on the island where we lived. One was on Boca Chica, where we had bombs and radar, and we had our water pipe all the way from Homestead, USA, down. It was about 110-mile long
Wow.
water pipe that always took fresh water to
To Key West.
Key West. And while I was there, one of my former teachers in Florida State told me that they were wanted to get ready to put technology programs all in Florida. Well, I decided to retire from the Navy at that time, which was November 1963, and started working for the Department of Education. We put 35 technical centers in Florida during the next several years, and 18 in community colleges where they were wanted to launch aircraft, and they didn't have enough assistance to their engineers to do all that. So I put 18 assistant technical people, programs in community colleges, while doing 35 to the education center on land.
He was working with NASA at the time.
From where? Where was he stationed?
He was out of the military then. He had retired.
Okay, right.
We were in Key West after we had the Cuban crisis, and we went through all of that. I was in the 10th and 11th grades when all of that was going on in Key West. It was very interesting because here we are in the United States, and we have a barbed-wired beach, and every branch of the military was there, stationed there at the time, and we had curfew, and we could see missiles. Everywhere they had clusters of palm trees, you could see missiles set up around the island. So it was a very interesting time.
What year was that?
That was 1965.
Wait, no, 62, we were in Key West.
Oh,
62, I think that was 62.
Right.
Because we moved here in 63 after you retired, so it was 61 or 62.
Okay. Up until this point, from the beginning of your career in the military, you feel like you always had all the supplies that you needed to do your job properly?
We had all the supplies we needed, all the fuel, oil, and water that we needed to fly. And we flew at night all the time.
How was the food?
Huh?
How was the food in the Navy?
Very good food. We had good food on an airplane. One time some Marines came out from Sumatra when they were fighting for the island,
Right.
and we were anchored outside of it, and we fed them some of our good food, and they were very thankful for it. They rode out there in a rubber boat to where we were anchored and came aboard the plane. We anchored, we found out who they were, of course,
Right.
before they got close, because we were ready to shoot them.
Those seaplanes had an 8-man crew, and it had a kitchen.
Uh-huh.
It was double level.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay. So, you retired. Where were you when you retired from the military? Key West.
And
When you retired, we were stationed in Key West.
yeah,
Where else did you get to travel during your military when you were on active duty? Where else did you get to travel besides the places that you've already mentioned?
well, there were 13 pilots that were training in the same place I was, and
More places you traveled, though, were in Europe.
oh,
Yeah.
Where'd you
went,
get? Go ahead.
went to the various places. I followed the 6th Fleet and the island in the Mediterranean Fleet, Malta, and I was training pilots there. I know one day we were flying F-8F out of Malta. I had learned to fly one so I could get flight time while I was doing training.
What was that you learned how to fly? What was it?
F-8F,
F.
fighter.
Fighter
It was the
propeller.
last of our fighter planes
Okay.
that were propeller driven,
And you said it was an F8 what?
F8F.
F8F, okay.
That means it was a fighter and it was a fighter plane that I flew.
Okay, nice.
All of Grumman's fighter planes were named F something like that. Two numbers and 2 letters and a number. That
Gotcha.
was the 8th plane they had furnished to the Navy.
Did you ever have any issues contacting your family while you were in the service?
Yes, I did.
Yeah?
My mother and I had the same kind of map. It was a big map, and we put numbers on all the things in the island of the Pacific. And when I would write to her, somewhere in my letter, I would say a number in English rather than by number. And she knew where I was at that time.
Okay. Okay.
If I told her, yesterday we flew about 12 hours one night and didn't see anything. That was the 8th of January or something like that. And so I told her we flew 8 hours at least that night.
She know you were at
She knew
Island Day.
where I was based in Newfoundland, in Sumatra.
So it was a challenge staying in touch, but you still found a way though, didn't you?
Yeah,
Uh-huh, okay, all right. Did you use your GI Bill to advance your education?
my what?
Your GI Bill, who paid for your college?
No, I paid for all of it. They were not paying for any
Really?
the 3 years I was at Auburn.
Well,
Okay,
you had a salary.
I had a salary there,
right,
and I had a friend who was in the Air Force teaching Army pilot,
right.
and
But I'm talking about
we
for
flew
your...
over to
for-
Maxwell Base and
Uh-huh.
flew B-25s for our flight time.
But what I meant was, for any of your degrees that you received, your own personal degrees, did the GI Bill pay for your education, or did you pay out of pocket yourself?
For your masters, who paid for that?
Okay.
Did you have to pay for it yourself, or did the military?
Did they reimburse you?
I think it was $300 total.
Oh my God. What world was that? So anyway, oh my God. Excellent, that's good.
To Auburn.
All right, I just have a few more questions for you.
Huh?
Where were you when you separated from the military? Where were you?
I was in Key West.
Okay. And again, what was the job? What did you do after the military? What was your career after the military?
My career was flying
No, Florida Department of Education.
Florida Department of Education,
Okay.
teaching people how to use radar,
Well, setting up
and setting
vocational
up
programs.
technical programs in the state of Florida.
And
I
building
set up
centers.
35 in the public schools and 18 in public colleges.
Nice. So you retired from the Department of Education?
Yes, I did.
How many years did you give them?
24, I think.
Wow.
I know it was in 1991 that I finally retired.
And you were how old?
75 years old.
Right, I remember your daughter saying that earlier. Wow. Incredible. Okay, so did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
I thought it was good myself. Taught people how to be on time and do what they were told. That's what bothers me now.
Is what?
People in the civilian area, sometimes assigned to keep care of me, never show up. And so I have to, finally I've got a lift that can lift me up and put me in bed or put me in my wheelchair. And it takes a person to run that lift.
Okay, so,
My daughter, Janet, can operate it and teach others how to do it.
so is that a problem, or?
No,
No.
I think what he's saying in military life, you had to be on time.
Right,
And if you were assigned to be somewhere, you had to be there.
right,
And civilian life is not always like that.
okay,
Yeah, it
Sometimes.
was hard for me to get used to people who could just not show up or drop out early or do things on their own.
right, gotcha. Okay, how did your service and experiences affect your life?
I think it taught me how to be a good man and be on time to everywhere I had to be. And that was hardly very difficult to be because I was taught in the Navy to be on time and do what I had to do when I had to do it.
Do you have any advice for young people coming into the military, going into the future?
I would recommend the military to teach them those things. I don't know, I didn't have any ladies in the military at that time, but I reckon they can do their part. And so I taught the people I know outside of the Navy that that was a good thing as well, that they had a part to do.
He always talked about training for a job so
Right.
that you would have something whenever you got out of the military.
Work ethic.
And I think that's why he really enjoyed working for the Department of Education, because he's touched so many lives with all these programs and buildings he was able to influence getting done in the state of Florida, because so many of them go to the technical centers as well, get certified and get jobs that pay more than, for instance, my own teaching did.
Auto mechanic, drafting, health occupation, many things that we do in public life. We have a training program for, if they'll use it.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for a wonderful interview, and I also want to thank you for your service. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.